Revolutionary greetings, comrades. Thanks very much for joining us today, as we're going to be dealing with the topic of commemorating the events of June 16 and reflecting on the struggles of the working class youth today. Today marks exactly 44 years since the Soweto uprising took place. Students on this day mobilized decisively against the ruthless and brutal apartheid regime. They would have been responding, number one, to the unilateral imposition of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. However, we know that there were issues beyond that. They raised issues of class content, issues, for instance, such as overcrowding in schools, and a number of others, including a chronic underfunding, which defined apartheid schooling, especially when it comes to the Bantu education. To deal with this topic today, we have comrades from the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in Gauteng who will help us to unpack the youth struggles on a number of themes that I'll outline just now. We will deal with labor and unemployment. We'll also be looking at gender and class struggles, and also we'll deal with the commodification of education. I'll outline just briefly the program. My name is Viola Tutoli, and I'm the spokesperson of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party. I'll just give this brief introduction for a few minutes, and thereafter we'll go to our panelists who will be dealing with the themes that I've mentioned, labor, gender, and education as they pertain to youth struggle. The first panelist is Comrade Mandla Ka Phangwa. Comrade Mandla Ka Phangwa is an activist who broke his tooth at COSAS in 1999. He joined the Socialist Azanian Youth Revolutionary Organization, the youth wing of the Socialist Party of Azania in 2002, and served in leadership positions at various levels. He joined the Economic Freedom Fighters and was one of its founding members. He is currently the chairperson of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in Johannesburg. Comrade Mandla Ka Phangwa will help us unpack the question of labor and unemployment. The second comrade is Comrade Nicolene Trom, who will take us through gender and class struggle. She is a socialist without borders, advocating for the social, economic, and political rights of women and children. She is an activist for community struggles in the Gauteng Civic Association. She is also the secretary of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in the Johannesburg district. And our third panelist is Comrade Mbali Ngwenda, who will be helping us to unpack commodification of education. Comrade Mbali Ngwenda is the convener of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in Tshwane Inner City. He has contributed in his personal capacity to vibrant organizations such as PSTEP, Bua Miauti, and Parkview CBO in Tshwane. Now, each comrade will be speaking will get between 10 to 12 minutes to unpack the topic. Each speaker will get 10 to 12 minutes to unpack the topic. We'll start with Comrade Mandla. He'll get his 10 to 12 minutes. We'll go to Comrade Nicolene, and lastly, we'll go to Comrade Mbali. Once they are done, we'll have an opportunity to give comrades on our Facebook platform and also on the Zoom platform to raise clarity-seeking questions as they arise from the discussion. Feel free to ask questions. We'll be able to collect the questions from our Facebook platform and on the Zoom. That process will take place for at least 20 minutes. We'll be taking questions, giving to the comrades as they are responding, and if there are any other questions that are developing, we'll take them and give to comrades to respond. With those few words, comrade, in the introduction, I'm now handing over to Comrade Mandla Ka Phangwa to help us unpack the question of labor and unemployment as pertaining to the youth challenges. Over to you, Comrade Mandla.
No, thank you, Comrade Vuyo, and greetings to all the participants, fellow panelists, and everyone at home watching from various platforms. First of all, would actually use this day not as celebrating Youth Day. We cannot celebrate and dance on the graves of our fallen heroes. Instead, that's why we call it for that we are commemorating this sad day. However, this sad day finds us as a country having been working in a very toughest situation, counting the current situation of COVID-19, youth unemployment, poverty, gender-based violence, and every social ills that actually are symptoms of capitalism itself. As a country, we actually see what the post-1994 dispensation has actually brought about, where not only we are receiving a post-apartheid state, but it comes with far worse problems which are created by capitalism, as I've actually mentioned that one of them is unemployment, which is affecting the youth. But then as Marxists and adherents of Marxism, we need to be dialectic in our analysis of every situation, where we are able to actually link historical developments and what is happening, and somewhat we can determine the future. The country at this point is said to be running at 60% of unemployment, which is youth unemployment. For any normal country, that's a very alarming statistics, which actually exposes that capitalism is not capable of creating any jobs, but it has capacity to shed more jobs and even actually increase the levels of extreme poverty. I think if we go back to linking 1976 youth and the current youth of today, the 1976 youth fought against apartheid and also for decent education, land, and Black power. Today, the youth is faced with unemployment, faced with exploitation, precarious labor, and all of the social ills you can count that are coming with capitalism. But those were created merely because the present day government adopted the dictates and the policies of the IMF and the World Bank, which actually went as deep as even trying to dictate the country at what level should it create jobs and how it should create jobs at what time. But now, 25 years later, we are sitting in a very alarming rate of above 60%, of which in my view, I can say it's even above 60%. It can go to 80% because for you as a young person to be declared as unemployed, you first have to be employed and then you lose the job, and then they will use those Department of Labor statistics to determine the unemployed. But what about those who have not even entered the labor market and those who've been looking at the labor market and even gave up looking for jobs? They're not captured. So as the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, one of our tasks is to actually expose these historical contradictions. If you check what other leaders has declared in 1996 as a class project, it came with a lot of job losses because that actually called for privatization of what they call today the SOEs. ESCOM shed plus minus 500,000 jobs in 1995. Telkom shed a lot of jobs. A lot of companies were shut down, meaning we were coming to a new dispensation which had already started losing jobs at its inception. Now it's coming back to haunt us, as you can see what is happening in the banks, in the SOEs, where young people are the ones who are actually shedding jobs. For instance, retrenchments always go with first in, last in, first out. And as a young person, you actually entered the labor market, having studied maybe 4 years for putting out an expanded argument, especially those who were being on the academic side of trying to upskill themselves to look for jobs. After studying, when they get to the labor market, they find that the labor market is shedding jobs. Young people are now pushed to various resorts where they can try and survive. And those resorts, some of them end them up in trouble. Some of them end up in drugs, alcohol abuse, crime, etc., etc. But those are symptoms, as you said. Those are symptoms. And without a revolutionary solution, you'd never solve those crises. We have a situation currently where in the labor market, the youth is being pitted against those who are already employed. When the labor movement raises issues of wages, better working conditions, and they go on strikes, companies are targeting youth and use the youth as escape labor, of which that on its own is pitting the working class against the working class. That's a trappings of the system that is happening. And in 1976, these were the same trappings that were happening in setting up the youth with the elderly people, that you elderly people, your youth are reckless and all of that. But now, having looked at our own manifesto as the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, especially speaking about the economy itself and say all the land ownership and capital private bases shall be abolished. I think that speaks directly to the state creating its own capacity to be able to take care of its youth. Because we're not being anti or ageist when we say the future of the young people must be determined by the young people. A person who's at the age of 60 years, they're already in future. We as the young people are the ones who are supposed to actually determine where are we going. And borrowing from Frantz Fanon itself, it's saying every generation has got its own mission, which it either betrays or it either pursues. So us as young people now, we have that mission to accomplish. First of the mission is to actually end privatization, because privatization on its own is shedding jobs, a lot of jobs. ESCOM is about to be privatized, what they call unbundling. It will shed a lot of jobs and young people will be casualties to that. SAA would be doing the same thing. Young people are victims to that. The banks have already been retrenching. Standard Bank is retrenching around 3,000 workers, which in their own admission is young people. However, we need to also be able to check the status quo of the Department of Labor itself, because we remember some few years back, one of our supporting unions and the revolutionary union in the country, which is the National Union of Metal Workers, they fought against the youth wage subsidy. The youth wage subsidy was an act that was passed in Parliament that companies need to be getting tax rebates for employing young people. Yes, companies have been doing that. However, the benefit doesn't go to the young people. Instead, the government is compensating companies to exploit young people. Because if you can get those young people who are doing internships in these companies, who are doing your mentorships and all these funny programs that they pronounce, most of young people are doing the equal work that can be done by a fully employed employee that perform the task and get equal work and equal pay. But what they will do, they will offer them stipends. At this moment of COVID-19 itself, there's more young people who were thought to be at the labor market, but they have crisis of UIF. They haven't been paid their UIF, they haven't been paid. So those are structural problems of the whole system itself. The Department of Labor itself has to be looked at, and especially having to take care of young people because they're the most on the line of exploitation. In terms of participation of the young people in the labor movement, it suffocates the labor movement because you cannot be in a union where you try to collect your subscriptions of unemployed young people. Casualization is hitting hard at young people. On top of that, we actually getting what now they call the EPWPs, which is currently happening in our townships. That's where young people get mostly exploited. They are given peanuts. You can come and see a young person working for the whole month, but getting paid only 1,000 rand stipend, of which they should use that for food, paying rent, and all of that. Currently, young people are living below even the United Nations, and the World Bank has admitted that poverty in South Africa, an average person is living below $1. And if an average young person is living below $1, what do we expect? We are expecting a chaotic country where there will be lawlessness, where there will always be a question of young people being victims of crime and all of what is happening. You go to Johannesburg prison, the majority there is young people. And on top of that, it is Black young people. We need to put that into perspective.
Yeah.
That it is Black young people that are exposed to all of these difficulties.
Absolutely. Comrade Mandla, just to check with you, my leader, without cutting, just 1 minute so that you begin to wind down, so that we're able to get the other comrades. Just to begin to wind down. Thank you.
Yeah. As we were saying, however, we could not just complain and say we see these problems, because analyzing without giving solutions also is problematic on its own. What we need now is a united left in Azania, South Africa. A united left that would be able not to try to fight for reforms within the system, but that would fight for a revolutionary change. And I think we have the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, which has come, and the revolutionary element in it explains itself that we're not a party that is coming to reform what is already happening, but we're a party that has to be revolutionary in its approach and its giving out into solutions. We need to also be able to give the young people of this country a voice of their own that would speak to the challenges that we have, calling for a united front that would actually call the holistic young people, especially on the left, Marxists, and the socialists, so that we move forward and trying to find solutions for our problems and making sure that when we challenge the system, we may not agree in a lot of things. We may not agree ideologically in some defects, but we agree that young people are unemployed, young people are living under poverty, and young people are actually exposed to precarious labor and exploitation. If we agree on those, I don't see us not having a united front of it. That's a discussion that we need to actually lengthen and be able to engage, especially with our fraternal organizations in the labor movement, your SAFTU, NUMSA, and all of them. I think I can put it in that fashion, in a nutshell, that this is an ongoing process. It's work in progress, which we need to actually embark on unconditionally.
Thanks very much, Comrade Mandla, for unpacking us the questions around labor, more especially as things are actually getting worse, especially during the COVID-19. Comrade Nicolene, it's now handing over to you, my leader, so that you help us to begin, for instance, to understand, unpack the question of gender and class struggle. Over to you, comrade. Just unmute yourself, comrade.
Revolutionary greetings, comrades. Thank you for having me, and a very good evening to everybody. When we talk about gender struggles, what should come to mind is that it is a huge project it is a huge human project that needs to be taken seriously on a day-to-day basics and hour-to-hour basics, because we talk about human dignity, we talk about human respect, we talk about human protection. Hence, we have laws that ensures that this happens. We've got things like then you think of your human rights laws, you think of your women and children rights laws. But if those are implemented, that's a story for another day. So as women, we had come to be experiencing harsh realities of life. The reason for that is that we are a we are a people in a collective that had been transgressing from a patriarchal society, which has been dominating for a decade. And it has laws of its own, and we had been subdued to these laws. We had been dominated by these laws. We economically, culturally, religiously, and politically. We back then, women were known as the weaker vessels of the society. That as a woman, in order for you to survive, you must have a man. A man will be the one that takes care of you. And when you have to be, even the Bible teaches us that women ought to be submissive. But then submissive in what context? And submissive, and as women, we had find the statement very demeaning, because being submissive, it means that you have to pay with your life in order for a person to be satisfied that you are submissive. You because and also with the harsh realities of the society. So because we had been now transgressing from a patriarchal society, there has been a change. There has been a change within the society, a change in a sense of that when women were taught to be submissive, men, on the other hand, were taught to not surpass their emotions. In order for a man to be reckoned as a man, as a real and true man, you should not be able to show your emotions. But now they were not prepared for this change that is now happening, whereby they have to now be competing with these women. They have to be on the same par with those women. And as our comrade from Umpati of Johannesburg had said, that we are experiencing a huge backlog of unemployment. So you find that also attributes in the things that now a man has to face in order for them to make a living. And that is kind of detouring them. It's leaving them angry, it's leaving them bitter, it's leaving them resentful. And that alone, the people that suffers the fate of that, it is women, it is children. The people that suffers this anger, it's women, it's children. You find that in workplaces. Women are discriminated in workplaces. In order for you to be given an opportunity, you are not given an opportunity based on your potential. You are given your opportunity based on how fast can you take your pants down. This is still happening in this day in this day and age. So with that being said, we need to come up with a strategy on how to eradicate this, how to end this, because this has shown itself in these brutal killings, in these awful murders that has been happening on our day-to-day lives. When you think of Inene from Cape Town, and you think of the latest Uterofazo, who was murdered by the very person that's supposed to be protecting her. So we had seen how protesting is not helping, or if it's helping, is helping a little bit. We had seen how the law, it's not implemented enough to ensure that women are safe, women are free, and women are experiencing the life that they ought to have. So what we need to do now is to go to the root of the problem, which is capitalism, that has brought the class struggle, which is capitalism that has kind of cause a shortage where men is concerned, that has kind of caused a shortage where women are concerned. So we need to lay out an environment for both men and women. Maybe we need to see why is it that these killings are not stopping, that men, even on this day, has the upper hand of thinking they've got the right to take life, they've got the right to give life. So we need to go back to basics, whereby I remember there were these times where there were Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts where men were taught to transit from being a boy into manhood. They were taught that. I'm not sure if today it's done, but if it's done, it is commercialized. So we have to form an environment whereby when we teach our young children how to be women, we are not neglecting on teaching our young boys on how to be men. I think I will pause from that and wait for your direction, Mr. Vuyo. Or should I carry on? Okay, with that being said, there's a lot that can be done in order to ensure that our women are safe, because now we fear for our children's life, we fear for our girls. And this is not only affecting women, because there are cases that are not reported. You know, hence we talk about gender struggles. There are cases from men that are not reported, that are in the mercies of their partners, cases that are overlooked at because the society has taught us that indoda ayikhali, you know, where men go to the police station and they can't even lay a claim because they would be laughed at, they would be made jokes. So it's a long process that we ought to take. Hence I said that it is a project that we need to embark on. And everyone, it needs me, it needs you, it needs a woman, it needs a man, it needs a child, it needs an elderly person. So yeah, I'll pause from there. Comrade Vuyo?
Sorry, comrades, we seem to have lost Comrade Vuyo, having a small technical glitch. I'm the background technical assistant, Mika, helping here. Maybe, comrades, we can just have Comrade Mbali may continue until we get Vuyo. Thank you very much, Comrade Nicolene. Mbali, if you can take us through the next phase.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mika. I'm sure you'll be sorting out the issue with Comrade Vuyo, as he's the one who's guiding us through this whole discussion. So hopefully on the technical side, you'll be able to help us. But greetings, comrades, friends. We are having this discussion June 16, and I think it's so far, comrades have dealt with the issues quite well, and we hope that we can get more questions after this. The issue I'll be dealing with, comrades, is the commodification of education. What that has done to us as young people, what that means for us as young people who are looking to aspire towards a future. We are trying to build a different kind of future, but we have realities that we are facing, and these are discussions that we need to be having as young people. Frank discussions, and discussions which we need to reflect on many of the things that we are facing. So as my point of departure, comrades, I would like to say that as a socialist party, as a socialist revolutionary workers party, socialism is what we attain or want to attain. But education is key to what we want to do, especially as socialists. I think sometimes as the SRWP, we articulate our ideology, socialism, but not many people really understand what it is. So comrades, for the sake of clarity, Socialism is a political and economic social system whereby the workers or the ordinary person will own the means of production. When we say we're talking about the means of production, we're talking about the land, we're talking about factories, we're talking about the equipment, we're talking about the capital. People must own or must have a stake in that. So, comrades, that is my point of departure, to say that we have defined socialism as to what it is. And remember, comrades, there are many different political socialist strands that can be used. So, comrades, to connect now our argument of the commodification of education. I'm seeing a glitch here. Stake in that. So, comrades, that is my point of departure, to say that we have defined socialism as hello. I think we have Comrade Vuyo back. Comrade Vuyo. Comrade Vuyo. I think he's back with us. Maybe the technical team will help us.
Comrade Vuyo, if you can just indicate if you can hear us.
Yeah.
We can hear you,
Can
Vuyo.
you hear us?
Hi, comrades.
There we go. So, comrades, I'll just continue from where I was. Now, when we say as socialists, we want free education, for instance, we need to understand what is the importance of education in order to attain a socialist society. Comrades, if you want to own the means of production, you need to be able to understand how to operate those machines, how to maintain that land, and how you need to understand the economy you'll be running. You cannot have a stake in something you don't understand. When you want to run something, you must have a background in that. And that is why education is a prerequisite to a socialist society. Now, in this country right now, we are very clear about the inequalities that we are living in. I think education is one of the best places to identify our inequalities and the contradictions of capital. For instance, if you go to our normal schools in the township, comrades, you know that we don't even have toilets, we don't have facilities. In fact, we have shortage of staff. And that is at a government school. And if you look at other schools, comrades, it is clear that everything is there. Facilities are there. Staff is there. Laboratories are there. Comrades, I can confirm that 1 in 3 government schools have a lab. How then do you produce scientists that are going to now come up with innovations to build this society that you want? When we say, comrades, we want free, quality, decolonized education, we need to understand what that means as socialists according to our ideology. Comrades, the state can provide free education, but it requires for the state to change the way it does things. The state can do it, but the state is not willing to make those changes. As we speak now, we have not attained free education. In fact, there are so many other students who still have to pay off loans to go and start because they were studying. They're still paying off those loans. They are taking loans as we speak. So we have not achieved free education, let alone quality education. And that's not just at the tertiary level, but we're taking it from early childhood development all the way to primary school, through our high schools and our universities. We cannot say that we have attained any form of decolonized education, because how will you decolonize that education when we have less than 13% of young people aged between 18 and 24 who actually graduate? We have such a small number of people graduating, but we're saying now we want decolonized education. Most people, frankly, are studying to get the qualification to get a job, jobs that don't exist. So you study to get a job that's not there, and then you're left to do what? So I'm saying, as a socialist, we must make sure that young people go to school are assisted to go to school so that they're not getting their bachelors and their diplomas, but they go to get their PhDs so that they can start writing these textbooks, which then are decolonized, so that they can start doing the research in the science and the physics, which is decolonized. That is the work we need to do in order to get to a position where we say we have decolonized education. So there's so much work that we need to do, but we have such a small percentage of young people who actually go to school. And that is a reality, comrades, that is a fact. When we're talking about commodification of education, comrades, I can say a government fee-paying school charges between 23,000 to 29,000 for a single student per year. Now, as we speak, as the working class, we are being subjected to slave wages, and we have about 10 to 15 dependents immediately and as our neighbors as well. How then do you access that education when you need money to do that? And that's when something becomes commodified. We can confirm that there are education companies which make turnovers of billions every year because of the school fees which are paid. Only specific people can go to those schools because they can afford them. So we can say clearly that capitalist society only serves the few. The majority is left to fend for itself. And now this is what we need to be discussing as the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party. When we say that we want to build a socialist society, it means everyone must have access to free, quality, decolonized education. And in that is a process. Not every child has a textbook. As a Black child, as a working class child, you must share that textbook. You must share a table, you must share your resources to study. And when you go to schools which are better funded, there are extra textbooks sitting in the storeroom. There are extra tables and extra chairs, you understand? So these are fundamental inequalities that we see clearly in our education system, starting from early childhood to primary to high school, all the way to higher education and training. So comrades, I will wait for more questions, but in terms of the commodification of education, I think it is best seen with how unequal the material conditions students find themselves in. You can see it, it's right in front of us. We see it from the time we leave our homes to when we get to the gates of our schools. Those are the things that determine the commodification of education in this country. If I can touch a bit on higher education and trading, there is a percentage in this country. In fact, there is about, I think, if not more than 40% of young people are not in school, are not in education, are unemployed, and are not in trading. It's about, if not 45 to 46%. That's a group of young people that are sitting idle, who are not being molded to attain a different kind of future. So, comrades, in short, for us to create a socialist society, for us to create a socialist state, education is fundamental, because we as the people, as the workers, must run that economy. We must run those companies. We must be making decisions as the working class, and we must make sure that we have free, quality, and compulsory decolonized education. And that's how we can get to where we need to be. I will pause there for the moment, comrades, for the sake of progress. Thank you very much, Comrade Vuyo.
Thanks very much, Comrade Mbali, and to the comrades. Let me first apologize, comrades. You know, the forces of technological counter-revolution dealt with me. They removed me from the Zoom whilst I was busy engaging. And my humble apologies, for instance, Comrade Nicolene. I know, co-leader, you were actually still articulating a very important position, but I managed to pick up some of the elements, and also I managed to get through in terms of what Comrade Mbali was saying. But comrades, thanks for that rich discussion. And indeed, the contradictions of the capitalist mode of production are actually now, at a time of crisis like the COVID-19, being laid bare open. They are sharpening. It is a moment for us to begin to gear ourselves for a program But let's begin to get some of the questions which the comrades have been raising. Now, for instance, Comrade Nicolene, just there are a few questions that are, there's just a few. One of them, if you can note, there's a comrade who asked, how will the SRWP ensure woman empowerment? How will the SRWP ensure woman empowerment? Just note that question. Amongst others, it also asked, how will it ensure that women are seen as equal to men in workplaces as well as in our communities? I think the comrade wants to begin to ask a question as to what should be the programmatic elements for us to begin to reach a goal where there is full equality for all. As you raised, for instance, the question, the contradictions that exist along gender lines, amongst other issues. So the comrade wants to know that how will the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party ensure that women are actually of equal status? You know, there's obviously aspects that also tie here with what the labor question, because equal pay for work of equal value in workplaces, but also in our communities. And then for yourself, Comrade Mandla, there was a question which asked, can you discuss the kind of campaigns? What kind of campaigns can you struggle around to fight unemployment in society? So really, if you check this question, they are programmatic questions. As much as the crisis is there, it's defining society. But what then becomes of our program to begin to channel our energy such that we deal with this brutal and backward system? Comrade Nicolene, maybe you can start dealing with the question that I posed to you, then we'll give to Comrade Mandla as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. With the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, what's important to understand is that women are not in competition with men. No men are in competition with women. We come into a capitalist system understanding that patriarchy has been at hand. So what we are doing is that we're not a party that wants to replace patriarchy with a matriarchy. We need to equip young girls, we need to equip women as much as we are equipping young boys and we are equipping young men. There needs to be a balance of force so that no one is higher than the other, or no one feels superior or inferior than the other. There is no competition amongst the two. We are human beings, and that's what makes us unique. Whether you're a female, whether you are a male, and what we are taught in the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party is we are. Equity is one of the most important balance sheet that you can give to your society, because without equity, then there is this a struggle of trying to get what the other one has. Therefore, women are really educated, women are empowered, women are geared up to face into the society. Women are made to understand their role as women. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you are less of a human being. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean that your place is in the kitchen, doesn't mean that your place is behind as a cheerleader. Your place is where your potential is. We judge you according to your potential and according to your capacity. So if you are a woman and you understand the ideology and the concept of SRWP, then we're not going to give a position to a man who does not understand the ideology and the concepts of SRWP just mainly because he's a man. No, we look at your capacities, at your humanly capacities. We look at the love that you have for the party, the love that you have for the people, because we do what we do because of the people. Amanda.
Thank you, Comrade Nicolene. Comrade Mandla, then there is a question I will direct to Comrade Mbali once you're done. Thanks, over to you, Comrade, just briefly.
Okay, thanks, Comrade. I think the question, if I've understood well, it says which campaigns are available for us to move forward in this question of all the issues I've raised. First of all, I would say, first of the campaigns that need to be advanced by young people, and not only the SRWP, is the Right to Work campaign. The Right to Work campaign should be first campaigns that young people have a united front in terms of addressing the question of unemployment and capitalism itself. Because once we start a campaign in isolation of other fraternal organizations, we're starting to operate as islands, and we can be easily defeated. Another campaign that we have to embark upon is an anti-privatization campaign. Anti-privatization campaign is actually relevant than before, because now what we see in the current ANC government led by Cyril Ramaphosa is that a mission to privatize. And the privatization in itself, it's problematic because it ends jobs and it's creating a lot of crises. And it also plays a big role in what the Secretary of Johannesburg has said in your gender-based violence. Because now we have a frustrated society which has to deal with a lot and has to actually get into those troubles, trying to fend off whatever frustration they have. Another campaign that I think we need to work around. There is a lot of young people out there, especially the unemployed. The Unemployed Youth Forum should actually be formulated, where it will take the struggles at the doors of the Department of Labor itself. Because if the Department of Labor can admit publicly so in the whole society that there are companies who are not paying unemployed insurance funds and nothing is happening to those companies, we're saying, as the SRWP, if we keep quiet on that, are we saying we're condoning that, or are we just putting a blind eye on that? So these are such campaigns that we need to embark upon. Again, I think we need to be able to organize solidarity of the workers and the students. Student and workers' solidarity is very pivotal at this moment, because what we see today, it is divide and rule. In universities, you've seen what happened when there was a united of outsourcing must fall with fees must fall. What happened was that bouncers were brought. Those bouncers are security workers, but they were brought to deal with young students who are working class also. So our campaign should be in a form of also trying to forge a united front of the left. But I think as the party, we are going through a lot of discussions in our constitutional platforms where we will actually discuss policies and campaigns and take it further. Thanks, comrade.
Thank you very much, both to you, Comrade Mandla and Comrade Nicolene. Now, Comrade Mbali, let's bring it to the conversation, comrades. There are questions as pertaining to the education question. One of the questions raised, I'll just pose two questions. One of the questions raised, Comrade Mbali, is that what are the things young people can do to organize and self-educate, Also, given the fact that the kind of education system that we, especially for instance in the schooling system that one will be exposed to, what are some of the energies which we can begin, for instance, amongst ourselves, organize and self-educate. And then the second part, Comrade, but just know this one, under COVID-19, how do we deal with the dangers to Black working class students and teachers? Others are calling for a stay away from school until it is safe to return. Do you think we must support the call for the boycott of schools? So obviously we know, for instance, this has been one of the issues, a very thorny and a burning issue in terms of return. And upon return, we see that actually, upon detection, that actually in these schools as they're opening, there are cases in which people are reported to be positive. What should be our posture, both in terms of an attitude, but also in terms of a program? So, Comrade Mbali, those are the two questions. Over to you, my leader. Comrade Mbali, if you may unmute yourself so that, we can hear you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Vuyo. Hope you can hear me.
Yeah, audible.
Those are two very interesting questions. I think the first one is extremely relevant. The second one is a current issue. I think I'll take some time also to deal with it. Comrades, the first question is, what can young people do to organize and self-educate? Comrades, I think for me, the biggest problem with young people is the fact that we are not organized. And I'm not just talking about the universities. I'm talking about young people in communities. A lot of young people don't belong to organizations. A lot of young people are not participating in their communities. A lot of young people, I can say, have gotten to a point of despair where people are just looking to waste their lives away. And I think this question is so critical because this is, as the SRWP, this is what we're trying to get out there to young people to say, let us get organized in our communities. That's the first thing that I can say. Let us join our community-based organizations. Let us assist each other to start our own organizations and run our own organizations. In trying to self-educate, those are things which need us to be organized. We cannot self-educate in isolation. We must come together and decide as to what we are going to try and learn and how we're going to unpack that. So being organized, joining an organization in your community, let us not struggle in isolation. As a Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, we preach a spirit of community. We preach a spirit of, I could say communism, but community is a more relevant word, to say, let's come together. And once we are organized, that's when we'll be able to start coming up with programs where we can want to self-educate now, where we can start unpacking our realities and the challenges that we're facing. So if you're not starting your own organization, join an organization, be a member of your community, an active member of your community. I think local community politics are starting to change, excuse me. We are starting to change from a bottom-down system to a bottom-up system. And for us to have a bottom-up system, we need more people to be part of structures which deal with issues in their communities. So for me, that is the biggest point that I can say to the first question. The second question regarding COVID-19 and the reaction towards the Black working class. Comrades, I'll say this in opening. Capitalists do not care about the working class. In fact, as the working class, we are only cheap labor to them. We are expendable. I say that we must look out for ourselves because the state will never do that. There are more people to replace others. So we must look out for ourselves, even though we want to continue with our work, even though, as Karl Marx would have expressed it very well, your work is an expression of yourself as an individual. So we must express ourselves and go to work and do our art and do our construction and things like that, but we must protect ourselves. So comrades, it's a tricky question and it's very difficult to give a direct answer to say, no, stay away or no, go to work, because the material conditions and circumstances are not the same. But what I will say to you is that the state will never prioritize issues of the workers. The workers are on their own. The marginalized are on their own, as we can clearly see with the comrade Mandla, who has articulated the issue with labor, with comrade Nicolene, who has articulated the issue of women and the class struggle. So just for the sake of sort of being direct, comrades, the state will never prioritize workers, and we must, in whatever decision we make, we must start there, and then we will see how we take it forward. I hope I've adequately answered the question. Comrade Vuyo.
Thanks very much, Comrade Mbali. Now you have dealt with sufficiently with the questions. And what I'm picking up, comrades, from you as you're responding, you see the key theme, the fundamental, is to organize, 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 and organize. There is nothing that beats that. You know, there's nothing that beats that. Perhaps as we slowly trying to advance towards our closure, there's at least a question maybe there's two. That one, Comrade Mandla, I would want to, there's one that I want to pose to you, the first one. Then the second one, I would like, for instance, yourselves, comrades, to have a reflection and take a bite on this question. The second, but the first one, here it is, Comrade Mandla. If you can just reflect. There's a comrade who asked, I think on our Facebook platform, he says, as you talk about forging unity, he's asking whether there has been linkages formed with the Casual Workers Advice Office with regards to their challenge to the Department of Labor regarding UIF for precarious workers such as domestic workers. You will know, for instance, this TRS, obviously the vulnerable workers would have fallen out. So I think the comrade is trying to say there are energies from the Casual Workers Advice Office who would have tried. He's trying to check whether there were any linkages from ourselves with that particular campaign. And then, just lastly, there is one comrade that I want to pose to all of you as panelists. The comrade who asked a very important question, and I know that the revolutionary comrade Amilcar Cabral, he hammered hard on the question of the cultural revolution. It's very important as part of the decisive instruments and weapons in the hands of the working class to begin to push back the frontiers of the capitalist mode of production, to begin to challenge and question it in all aspects. So the comrade who is asking this question says, how will the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party advance a form of cultural revolution to re-educate or educate the people of Azania in terms of gender-based violence, gender bias, racism, sexism, toxic masculinity, and all other forms, which serve to give charge to the capitalist system, because we know that capitalism needs all these forms of divisions to actually make sure that it has lifeblood. These are conditions which actually give it life, and so on and so forth. So the comrade is asking, how will, as the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, advance that cultural work, that cultural revolution, such that we begin to educate with the objective of educating and changing people's outlook on these particular issues. The work that the comrades, for instance, such as Steve Biko and Umkhuputse Tiro in the times of SASO, they did fundamentally the work of the Black consciousness movement at the time to begin to deal with some of the inferiority that the white supremacist regime of apartheid was trying to hammer on learners. So how are we going to begin to do that work, that cultural revolution work? Comrade Mandla, the first question that was asked by the comrade of the Casual Workers Advice Office in relation to the work they begin to do with challenging the Department of Labor regarding the vulnerable workers. Then the second part, I'll then begin opening it to all of you just to reflect before we approach closure.
Thank you, Comrade Vuyo. I think the comrades of the Casual Workers Advice Center, in some of our branches, especially in Johannesburg, like we can count your Freedom Park branch and others, there has been efforts to create a link with the Casual Advice Office, because already in some branches, there's already labor advice centers, which during the COVID-19 were trying to help the workers deal with the distress that was caused by the lockdown itself, i.e. the issue I was talking about of UIF, the issue about others who are not getting paid. And I think there was a comrade within the party who actually reported some of the companies that during the lockdown always pushed people to go to work, and they were exploiting, of which those were taken seriously. But to answer it directly, there has been no official communique from the SRWP direct to the Casual Workers Advice Office, of which I think this question can open up that discussion that we need to actually link up. However, there are programs that the Casual Workers Advice Office is doing in the townships, and our comrades are really participating in there. Because it's apolitical, a comrade cannot participate and say, no, I'm participating on behalf of SRWP, but they are participating mainly because they are activists, and as a member of the Workers' Party, workers' struggles are your struggles too. So I think it should actually speak that even the Casual Workers Advice Office stretches its net back to the township, and we go back to what, and actually important enough, the Black consciousness movement you just spoke about, Comrade Vuyo, usually during the 80s and in the early 90s, had labor advice offices in the townships. And in the townships, that's where you can get your labor practitioners who are advising people on the challenges that they are facing. So I would advise the comrades that even if they can be private or what, they contact us so that we can be able to discuss this further and create that linkage and also a relationship with that office.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mandla. Maybe the second question now, Comrade Nicolene, I'll begin with you because it was actually raising, then Comrade Mbali, then Comrade Mandla also, if you want to reflect, I'll give you before we begin to tie up the discussion towards closure. But this question really was asking how the SRWP will begin to advance a cultural revolution with the objective of re-educating or educating our people in terms of a number of issues which we have raised, some of them, the question of gender-based violence, gender bias, racism, sexism, and all the ills that define our society. Over to you, Comrade Nicolene, then Comrade, in that order, Comrade Nicolene, Comrade Mbali, and then lastly will be Comrade Mbali. Just if each of you can just deal with that in just a few minutes.
All right, comrade. With the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, our aim is very clear. We had identified our target, and we don't fret about it. That our target is the capitalist system, which now has resorted in all these your gender-based violence, your sexism, your racism. Those are just fruits of the capitalist system. So what we as SRWP, if we believe in nipping it in the bud. You know, we believe in fighting the system that is causing all these things, because it doesn't help we pluck out the fruit and we leave the roots. Because with gender-based violence, I think what most people do not understand is that not only women are affected with gender-based violence. Like, for instance, there's a man in Bloemfontein that has been stabbed to death by his girlfriend, but you don't see that on social media. And why is this? These are just the fruits of the capitalists to bring about division within the people. These are just some of the things that is stirring the people and causing dissension amongst the people. What we need to fight is to fight the fact that no one has got the right to take anyone's life, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. And when it comes to racism, racism factors from economical structures, where there's racism is more about who owns the means of production, and that stirs in the society that we live in, because it brings now about class struggle. We need to eradicate that everyone is equal. You know, everyone has got the right to decent living. Everyone has got the right to work. Everyone has got the right to live the life that they want to live. And then you also spoke about with all these things that you spoke about, it will not help if we keep fighting them individually. What we need to do, hence I said that our target is very clear. You know, we know what we are up against. So what we need is the unity with all the communities, unity as a people of South Africa, unity as workers, unity with the poorest of them, of the poorest, to understand the system that is at hand. Because once we understand the system, everything else that is connected to the system, we will be able to eradicate it. As long as we don't understand the system that is oppressing us, because this system is very much brutal. This system knows no boundaries. It knows no color. So once we get to take away, to overthrow the system, but the only way to overthrow the system is for people to start acknowledging where they are, because the racism is not our problem. The system is our problem. Gender violence is not our problem. The system that allows these is our problems. I'll hand over to the other comrades. Thank you.
Okay, Mbali. Let's take a bite, my leader, on that question.
Thank you, Comrade Vuyo. I think this is a very interesting question, Comrade Vuyo. I think whoever was asking this question is very much familiar with the theory of communism and socialism. A cultural revolution is imperative to changing society and actually creating something completely different to what we have. When we talk about a cultural revolution, we can reference our Antonio Gramsci's, who told us about hegemony and counter-hegemony. And I think in simple terms, comrades, what the SRWP practically is doing now to start to move towards a cultural revolution is political education. That's the first place that we can start. Because for you to change a culture, you must understand it. You must understand its aspects. You must understand where it comes from. And you must understand what is foreign to you and what is foreign to you as an individual. So I think that's the first most practical step that the SRWP is taking towards building a cultural revolution. And if we can just entertain this for a short while. South Africa is very westernized in its economics, in its politics, its culture, you know, in so many different ways. And when you want to talk about indigenous thinking in terms of our, let's say, in terms of how we arrange our housing, our indigenous thinking is put aside. Our indigenous thinking is marginalized. And now this is how we start to see how that culture, which was imposed on us, stops us as a people in advancing in a natural way forward to something that's going to allow us to do something different with our lives. So as communists and as socialists, a cultural revolution is imperative. I can say that the former president of Uruguay, Jose Mujica, stated that culture is where capitalism has us. It is the culture that young people want to buy. It is the culture that young people embody in their clothes. It is the culture that young people buy in the clubs in terms of the alcohol and the things that we take. It is the culture that convinces young people that they have apparently made it in life, that gives young people a specific image of what success is. It is a culture that we are trying to buy ourselves into, a culture which is foreign to us. So in short, comrades, I think it's a very, very critical question, but it's a question that needs more time to unpack, because we need time to see the elements in these cultures and to see how those cultures provide contradictions or, you know, within ourselves. That's why so many young people feel so alienated. So many young people feel isolated and out of place. It's because of this culture and because of the suppression of what might be more natural to them, because whatever is indigenous is backwards, apparently. Whatever is indigenous is not something that can be accepted in contemporary society, let alone coming up with new innovations, let alone coming up with a new economics and a new politics. So very interesting question, Comrade Vuyo. I hope I've touched enough on it, but we needed more time for this, my leader.
Thank you, Comrade. Comrade Mandla, just briefly, Okeliam, so that we begin to tie it up nicely.
Yeah, no, I think, comrades, the latter speakers, my fellow comrades, by Chile, by Chile. However, what we need to actually focus on is capitalism. I think capitalism is the problem here. The rest that has been counted, your gender-based violence, gender bias, racism, those are just symptoms of the sick system that is there. And I mean, we've been told about the symptoms of COVID-19. So we cannot say the symptoms are COVID-19. Those are symptoms of showing that you have COVID-19. So your gender-based violence, our bias, racism, sexism, those are actually systematical problems. And for a country that is like South Africa, I always tell the comrades that we disagree with this thing of colonization of a special type. No, there's no colonization of a special type. The working class struggle is national in its content, but it's international in its form. Meaning, these problems that we are facing as a country, they do not become special to South Africa. They are problems internationally that are facing capitalism. And for us to be able to defeat all these things, our international solidarity, our national solidarity should be strengthened. We have to create first a revolutionary culture, and a revolutionary culture is not to fight for reforms, but fight for change. At this moment, it's high time that we actually use the COVID-19 as an exposure to the system that has exposed. In history, we didn't understand when they said no, alcohol and other things, they're the cause of gender-based violence, but there was a lockdown of alcohol, there was everything, but gender-based violence was increasing. That shows that capitalism itself has crisis. And I think racism itself, comrades, for capitalism to be strengthened and be anchored in the ground, racism must be there. During colonization, when they colonized us, first they attacked our culture. And if we are dialectical materialists, we'll actually look back to our culture and be able to find solutions that can help us go further. But however, the latter speakers have covered me, and I'm looking forward that we have these discussions, especially topic by topic, so that we can be able to unpack them with much time and sufficient time, then we can be able to talk and give them justice. I thank you, comrade.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mandla. Thanks very much to Comrade Nicolene. Thanks very much to Comrade Mbali. Indeed, comrades, I think the key theme, even though we're raising the number of issues, but the key theme is that capitalism is the crisis. And because we are commemorating, paying respects, to the revolutionary giants who would have paved the way for us in the era of the 70s, I think it is important for me just to, before we tie up, we close, just to quote Steve Biko, because Steve Biko, on this question, as exactly complimented as you're ending, he said, there is no running away from the fact that now in South Africa, there is such an ill distribution of wealth that any form of political freedom which does not touch on the proper distribution of wealth will be meaningless. The whites have locked up within a small minority of themselves the greater proportion of the country's wealth. If we have a mere change of faces of those in governing positions, what is likely to happen is that black people will continue to be poor, and you will see a few black filtering through to the so-called bourgeoisie. Our society will be run as of yesterday. So for a meaningful change to appear, there needs to be an attempt at rearranging the whole economic pattern and economic policies within this particular country. If we have not dealt sufficiently, the economic base itself, capitalism needs all these other forms of division. They are only mere symptoms, but the actual lifestyle itself is the capitalist mode of production. And that's where, comrades, we need to mass our forces to that center of gravity, which is capitalism. With that being said, comrades, I think it is important for us to organize, not only ourselves as young people, but organize all the layers of working class in the communities. Because capitalism is attacking us, it's launching a serious onslaught on the working class on so many fronts, as we are seeing with the COVID-19. COVID-19 is exacerbating an existing crisis which existed long before the abnormal situation of the capitalist crisis. Obviously, even now, for instance, as we deal with this, there is a question of the Black Lives Matter with the brutal murder of Comrade George Floyd in the United States. That on its own, the question raised by the Black Lives Matter movement, must not shift our attention to the fact that capitalism, it feeds off of things such as racism and others. So we must dedicate all energies as much as possible, but begin, I think one of the themes, comrades, that you are raising is that we must organize, we mobilize, we must educate and agitate the working class. You know, it is possible. We must not allow this moment to pass us, because once this lockdown and COVID-19 and things like that, they go off, we must begin to ask ourselves, what is the kind of a society that we want? We want a socialist society. We want a society built upon socialist values, justice, equity, peace, and a number of other issues that will then begin to enable us to rid ourselves of the capitalist ills and so on and so forth. But the fundamental thing is that capitalism is the crisis, and then we must dedicate all the energies. Let's thank all the comrades, for instance, who have joined us in our platforms, the Facebook platform, comrades who have joined us on the Zoom. We have had a very rich discussion with the three comrades. Indeed, comrades, I'm sure that there are some other questions, but this is an ongoing conversation that we must continuously have. We will need more time going forward, but this is just a beginning. We must encourage ourselves as members of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party to have this debate, but not only have the discussions, let's engage on the programmatic elements, the program of action to deal decisively with capitalism. With that being said, comrades, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your comments, your questions, and to our panelists, thank you very much, comrade, for insight, a full and a rich discussion that we have actually powered ourselves with. You know, this is how we must deal and commemorate days like June 16, not the pacifying empty speeches and things like that. This is not a time to celebrate, but for us to reflect and organize ourselves to deal with the capitalist enemy with all our energies in us. Thanks very much. That ends our discussion for today. Mandla.
Wait.
Yeah.